Welcome back to Change Your Perspective, Change Your Awareness, Change Your Life. I'm Dr. Michelina, hashtag that felon doctor. And as you know, well, maybe you don't know, we're shifting topics today. So we're going to talk about, I've talked about this on my TikTok before, I've talked about this on my Instagram before as a high level overview, but I'm going to give you guys a more in-depth perspective on it. There are 6 mentalities that keep you in lack energy, that keep you small, that keep you disempowered, that keep you not living at your most authentic fullest, okay? And they are these: victim mentality, invincibility mentality, perfectionistic mentality, entitlement mentality, people-pleasing mentality, and codependency mentality, okay? And the first 3 are really like self versus self. Victim, invincible, and perfection are self versus self. Those are all things that we do to ourselves. We might internalize from external sources, but at the end of the day, those are things that we do to ourselves. Entitlement, people-pleasing, and codependency are person versus society or person versus person. Those are things that happen in partnership a lot of times. So I want to start off with the victim mentality, because the victim mentality is so rampant in our society. It is actually disgusting. And so what happens in the victim mentality is that anytime you're blaming anybody else for anything that happens in your life, you're in victim mentality. You just are, right? So if I go to somebody and I'm like, hey, so this deadline was missed. What happens? Like, oh, well, you know what? Joe didn't tell me what I needed, and then you never actually specified this, and then this person never did this thing, and this thing never did this. And it's like, oh, I'm not talking to Joe. I'm not talking to that person. I'm talking to you. What was your part in this? You can hear victim mentality so easy to hear. It's like a no-brainer. They can never be accountable. And I'll tell you to the God's honest, and you guys know, if you know me, you know that I don't struggle with victim mentality anymore. Like at some point I absolutely did. No longer do I struggle with it, even 1%. And so when something happens at work or something happens in life, I'm like quick to see what was my part in it, because you had a part in it. If there's 2 people in a conflict or adversity, more than likely 2 people need to be together to have a tango. Therefore, 2 people have their part to play in the dynamic. Therefore, you should be taking a solid evaluation of what your part was in the dynamic, okay? So victim mentality never, and I do mean never, takes their part. And I'll give you an example that I'm not kidding you. This was a real conversation I had with somebody at one point in time. There were 2 people in a conflict. They're both very victim-minded people. And I was talking to the one who had literally no ability to be objective. This is a 50-year-old man, by the way. 2 50-year-old men who are fighting, by the way. And I'm 33, I'm a whole generation younger than the both of them. Clearly seeing things that they cannot see for the life of them. So I talked to this man, and I'm like, because every time I walked in the space where he would tell me, he would like harangue me with this story about the many slings and arrows he had suffered, right, at the hands of this other person. And all of this was pre me, like even entering the picture. I was like, he's telling me all these things. I'm like, okay, sir, just a quick question. What was your part in the conflict, right? All of these things happened. What was your part in that? And he was like, oh, me? I didn't do anything. I was an absolute angel, like verbatim. If that is your response, I already know you don't know how to be accountable. You might physically be 50, emotionally and mentally, you're 3. You're a child. Victim mentality is always indicative of being a child, emotionally or mentally, right? Now, children in victim are allowed to be children and victim. Like they of course they're going to blame everybody else. They don't want to be accountable. They're children. They're 0 to 10, I guess, The age of accountability is a really tricky thing. Depends a lot on like belief system, depends a lot on laws, depends a lot on a lot of things. But let's say really like 0 to 13 tends to be very low level accountability. You can obviously always want to teach the children how to do this thing, and then you want to hold them accountable for it. But at the end of the day, like, we are less inclined to hold 0 to 13 children accountable for really much of anything other than like chores and stuff. When we get to a point, we start holding people accountable in ways that they don't necessarily hold themselves accountable. And so if you get good at holding yourself accountable to a standard that outmatches pretty much anybody else around you, you're going to come back into control of your life, because nobody is going to have to enforce you. You enforce you. You control you. You police you. You are the one that takes accountability for your stuff, right? And so like when, as my own example, when I got arrested, like I knew I wasn't going back to that school. So what did I do? I made sure that all of my grades were great, like all of the grades were in. I made sure I gave all the stuff back to somebody. I was like, this is going to be ugly. Let me do my part to be as accountable to the profession while I'm still in it as possible. So I graded all the things I could grade. I did all the things I could do. I talked to all the people I could talk to before I was like, I'm never going to be able to talk to these people again. And sure enough, that's what happened, right? And so like, you don't want to, well, everybody is entitled to do whatever they want. You want to stick your head in the sand, go ahead. You want to blame other people for your misfortunes, go ahead. But the sooner that you are like, okay, this is my problem, how can I deal with it? My finances are my problem, how can I deal with it? My health is my problem, how can I deal with it? My relationships are my problem, how can I deal with it? My life is my problem, how can I deal with it? And then you stop being problem oriented and you start being solution oriented, right? Victim minded people are always problem oriented. It's always a problem. It's always a problem. It's always somebody else that has made this problem happen. It's like, okay, I don't care about the problem. What is the solution and how are you involved in it? Because if you are not, then I have nothing to talk to you about. Goodbye. Right? And so victim mentality is the best indicator, honestly, of whether somebody has a growth mentality or a fixed mentality. And that is, all 6 of these mentalities are indicators of fixed mentalities, but which means that you are closed-minded, basically. Growth-minded means you're open-minded, essentially. And so if you're victim-minded, you are never open-minded because it's never your fault. If it's never your fault, there can be no room for growth there. You never did anything wrong. You never did anything that was not up to par. You can't work with that because at the end of the day, you cannot help somebody who will not help themselves. So if I address somebody and I'm like, hey, I had an ex, right? As an example, I was like, hey, well, why are you talking to this girl? And he's like, well, she called me. And I was like, yeah, that's not accountability. That's victim. That's victim, right? It's not, oh, well, I instigated the conversation with her by liking her Instagram photo. I did that. That's why she's talking to me. That's why I'm talking to her. Accountability sounds so much sexier, honestly, because it's unapologetic. It's owning it. It's just like, yep, that happened, right? And victim sounds so cowardly. It sounds so ugly. A friend of mine has a boss who, she's a terrible manager and certainly not a leader, terrible manager. And he'll be like, hey, you know, am I working today? And she's like, oh, I don't know. I'll let you know if I need you. And so then he's like, maybe it's happening, maybe it's not. And then she'll call him like 2 hours into what would be a shift. I'm like, hey, I need you to come in. And it's like, no, or okay, I'll be there. And then he gets there and everything is a complete crap show. And it's like, why isn't anything ready? It's 2 hours into the day and you called me. And she's like, oh, well, you should have gotten here earlier. Like if you objectively look at things like that, it's like that literally makes no sense. It's not logical. The victim mentality is not logical. It's emotional. It's emotional. I can never be accountable. I can never be wrong. I can never be the one. And it's like, oof, it's not attractive. It's just not. Unapologetically own your stuff. Then at least people can respect you. Right? Like, I mean, I literally sent nude pictures to a 16-year-old student and people still can respect me. You know why? Because I owned my shit. It's like, yeah, I did that. That happened. And we're moving on because that's 5 years ago. And at this point, like, life moves on. And if you're not going to, then like, I can't help you, but I am. So like, see you, bye. And so victim mentality is one of the absolute mental strongholds that will keep you very stunted in your growth, very much in the repetitive patterns of your life that don't serve you, and will not get you the things that you want. They just won't, because you're focused on the wrong things all the time. You're focused on external circumstances that don't serve you. You're focused on things you can't control, that you can't do anything about because you're a victim. I can't do anything about that. No, yeah, you can though. You can though. Get out of victim. If you're thinking, I can't do anything about that, you're in victim mode and it doesn't serve you. Right? And so we're going to be talking about this this whole upcoming week, but this is how you gain your power back. This is how you grow to be more authentic in your life. This is how you transform. This is how you get what you want. This is how you own your reality. So if that is helpful to you, like, subscribe, comment, grow the channel, grow the network, and then I will see you guys on the next video.